and the SPCA. There's two parts to the SPCA. There's the part that's operated as a county pound, and then there's the part for animal transfer.
FDC, that's fire department?
I'm sorry.
SPCA, the animal
Oh.
Society for the Prevention
animal
of Cruelty.
Okay.
Yeah, if the county did not contribute towards the pound side of the SPCA, then the county would have to build its own facility and operate it. And so economically, it is much more affordable for us to make a contribution towards these outside entities than it is for the county to fund it ourselves. And that's in the tune of, I think, about $3.5 to $4 million out of the budget does go to that. There is a very objective scoring process. We don't pay basically to startup entities. We look for those that are already operational and have demonstrated their financial stability. And then we look to I think there are about 15 or 20 different categories of considerations. How many residents in the county are served by this entity as opposed to in the region?
That's good.
What is the value of the service being provided to the county residents? And we look at things like their administrative overhead costs. So if they spend a lot of money on themselves rather than on the service that they're providing, then they're much less likely to get funding from the county. Once an entity has been approved for funding, provided that they continue to maintain their status, then historically we have been able to continue to fund them at a comparable level going forward. Of course, we also are looking at, like everyone else in the world, inflationary costs and looking to improve.
Well, that leads me to another question. We talked about maybe having our budget rather than being balanced, that we'd have a surplus in case there was inflation or something. Does Albemarle, or do they look at that, or do they just, I mean, they have money in the coffers in case, you know?
Surplus is an interesting word to use. There are, I think, about 3,400 counties in the United States. 41 have what is called a AAA bond rating, which means all three of the rating services give the highest score possible. Albemarle County is one of those 41. In order to maintain that, we must keep, in order to retain that AAA bond rating, we have to maintain a minimum of 10% of revenues in a strategic reserve. A few years ago, the Board of Supervisors increased that by an additional 1%, so it was a total of 11%. And because of what's happening with inflation and the uncertainty of revenues, we just this year have increased it to 2%, an additional %. So it would be the 10% minimum that's required plus an additional 2%. Again, I'd like to go back to the capital improvement plan has gone up $38 million in a 12-month period, the expense of that. So by having this strategic reserve, we are able to adjust and still accomplish our mission without having to cut things that have already previously been budgeted. So we call that a strategic reserve. I acknowledge that there are some who will call it a surplus.
Okay.
In my way of looking at it, a surplus is when you have planned that your revenues will exceed your expenditure. We have not planned for a surplus. Okay. What we have planned for is the minimum 10% to keep that AAA rating plus the 2%. And 2 years ago, we were able to refinance a number of our bonds and save the county about $5 million over the course of those bonds because we had the AAA bond rating. If we had not had that, we would not have been able to refinance and save the taxpayers that $5 million.
Just one more. I know I'm asking a lot of questions, but so this strategic reserve at the end of the year, say you have 10, 12%. Does that just go over into the savings, or do you say, okay, now we got 12%, let's give some bonuses, let's give some, we got some things we could do here, let's use that money?
Well, if at the end of the year we still had the full 12%, it would roll over to the next budget year.
All right.
Now, every year we have had to go into that strategic reserve a little bit, and that's why we increased it from the 10% that we have to have to a total of 12%. We actually, and I apologize, I can't think of what the item was. I believe it was and I might be wrong on this, but it would be a good example, whether it's the actual example or not. We recently completed a comprehensive compensation study of all employees in the county, with the exception of the Board of Supervisors and the employees, the 3 employees that the Board of Supervisors appoints, the county executive, county attorney, but actually the clerk for the board was part of that. As a result of that, we identified some positions that at the initial hire were above the target rate that we had set, but a number that were well below it. And what we've done is use some of the money from the strategic reserve to be able to bump up those salaries that were well below average to put those employees on a more comparable level. And the reason we needed to do that is because just a couple of years ago, we were very short on fire and rescue as well as law enforcement. And so what we had to do was increase their salaries so that we are no longer the lowest in the region, because we were losing on those employees. Same thing in community development and other areas. So by having the strategic reserve and seeing where we were running into personnel shortages, we were able to take some of that money, bump up those salaries, and reduce the attrition that we were experiencing as a result of particularly the University of Virginia, which has greater financial resources, pulling away some of our best employees.
Wow.
Other questions?
Thank you for your questions. I
Thank you.
appreciate the opportunity to address the board, the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else from the public? Harold, what's up?
I have 3 things I'd like to discuss.
All right,
Okay,
go right ahead.
I'm gonna make them as simple as I can and as calm as I can. And then I'll ask him to come back to get into more detail than what I'm presenting today. And it would take maybe 3 or 4 months to get it all covered. And it'll be a little bit at a time, so you can comprehend what I'm saying. Okay, now first of all, I think all of us should review the town charter. Some of us are new members and we haven't read it at all, and I'm not accusing anyone. But I think that's a basic thing, that we have to read that town charter. And one of the things that comes up is this is the governing body right here, the mayor and 6 council. Okay. There's several things. There's no position for vice mayor in a town charter. It's called the president of the council. And the council elects the president. And that's in the town charter. So we don't have a vice president. Next, you can call him anything you want. But the problem is, you appoint this president of the council on the council, and he still takes over the responsibility of the mayor. But how can the mayor only votes when there's a tie vote? So how can a councilman be the town mayor or a vice or whatever you call it, president of the council? It's a conflict that should be resolved. That's all. Now, on special meetings, every council member should be notified of a special meeting. And today, it's a lot harder, because how do you notify them? With email, telephone call, or anything. But I think, in my mind, you should be able to ask for a signature that you've been notified. And I think that's reasonable. Be added to mail. The other thing is a quorum is four is a majority, or 4 people out of 6 is a majority. But a quorum is 4 people. Now, if you have a tie vote, 2 voting here and 2 voting there, the vice mayor or president of council who's serving on the council, how can he vote? That's a question that I see in the town charter, among others. All right. The second is the state code and a planning commission. The state code does not say the mayor has the right to appoint a planning commission member. That's up to the governing body. The governing body is all 6 of you, not one. And then the president of the planning commission isn't appointed by the council. It's appointed by the planning commission. And so it has to take a majority of the planning commission to elect a president for the council, the planning commission. That isn't how it's handled here, and people raise their voice, and I have to, about this. But I'm, in the section, if you want the code, it's 15.2-1212.
I believe that is how,
Yeah.
we do not
We do not.
select the chair.
Right. Because I was planning
of
commissioner,
the-
chairman.
Under the understanding that's my
They have their annual meeting every
under
day.
the impression.
It does work that way.
And it's just an impression that was really
Yeah.
verbalized quite clearly. That Manatee View did it, and I'm gonna do it.
Well, that wasn't for the president.
That was for liaison.
That was-
That was different.
That was for the chairmanship.
No, that was different. That was
It
different.
was
Yeah.
for the
Liaison.
liaison.
There's just, yeah.
Not for the.
Representatives.
chairperson.
Yeah, that was different.
Lisa is the chair, that was.
So who is the chair of the planning commission?
Lisa
Lisa.
Talbot.
Who?
Cataldo.
Caltabiano.
Right.
And she was,
I think you-
Catalbiano, she was Lisa Catalbiano, and she was voted that by the planning commission,
We do not have,
wasn't she?
No. Okay.
Really? At the annual meeting? Maybe I'm wrong. I know I was, when I was a chairperson, and we had a meeting every August. And we voted that,
I was too.
yeah, and they voted, but maybe we've gotten away from that. Maybe we've gotten away from that, but that's a good point, because I think that is good protocol.
That is, I'll be honest with you,
Huh?
that isn't how I understood it last
Okay.
Monday.
we
Okay.
were talking about.
That was different,
the
yeah.
council liaison.
But that's good to know. I
There's
didn't
no
know.
such position. In planning commission, there's ordinance, there's no liaison. The whole planning commission is the liaison.
Yeah.
The liaison is with Urbana County, Albemarle County, all the other jurisdictions that are affected by what this planning commission does. And it affects the Department of Transportation also. Okay, and I don't know who the liaison is with the Department of Transportation. Maybe someone could
We don't
help
have
me with
that.
that, and you could scream all you want, and I can't do it. Well, and the other thing in the town charter is the town clerk is not a town clerk. He isn't Mr. Lawless's assistant. He's a clerk of the council. And he reports to the council. Okay? And that's a subtle difference. But he has to keep records for the council's benefit. Not for Mr. Lawless's and not for the mayor, but for the council. So let's get that straight.
Harold, if I could, over here,
Yes,
the council can have a clerk of the council. Town can have a clerk.
personally.
The town can have a clerk and the council can have a clerk. They can be two separate people. But here at Scottsville, it's one duty. Now, I'm not sure it had evolved that way, but I don't think I'm mistaken.
Because the town code, the town charter says clerk of the council.
Hmm.
It doesn't say assistant the administrative officer.
But we also don't call him.
Excuse me,
Yeah, he's the clerk, he's the town clerk, and then
no, he's a council clerk. He's a clerk to the council.
he fills both roles. This evening, he's taking minutes for us,
He has to report to one person. He doesn't report to
Does it
Mr.
say-
Wallace or any other town administrator. He reports to the council.
I'm not being facetious, I'm not,
I'm
I'm genuinely asking, does it say
Yes,
in the charter that it must be two separate people?
no, but it says he reports to the town council.
That's true. I believe that, yeah.
Council voice down.
That's true.
I think Mr. Rudolph.
And he doesn't report to the town administrator. It doesn't say that.
But the town clerk, okay.
No, you made up position, town clerk. You just don't make up positions.
No,
It's clerk. It's the clerk.
and yearly averages, yearly averages.
I don't care. I'm just letting you know what it is.
Let's start to bring this to a conclusion there, Mr. Pillar. We have other business tonight, please.
I'm not finished.
Oh, no, I want you to finish up.
Are you gonna shut me off?
No, sir, I'm asking you.
You want to shut me?
I'm asking you to finish up.
Is that what you do? That what you do? You want public input? And then you shut me off, you run out of time, you want to talk about signs?
Just finish up. Just finish up, okay?
Okay, that's two things,
All right.
okay? The third is our committees. When we elect a council, another name for that council is town committee. What's the difference what you name it? That's what the government does, that's what we elected for. Is to be our representative to do town business. That's why we elected the committee. But now we have a government services committee to supplement the government committee. And then on top of that, we have a select committee to pre-audition the people that are going to be selecting the government services committee. So what we have is three committees doing the same thing. We don't need it. We elect a council to do our job. We elect a town committee to do to do the job. That's all.
Okay, thank you for
I
your
hope
comment.
that's not beyond your understanding and comprehension.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Pillar. We will-
That's enough.
Take them under advisement.
You're running out of time. You could talk about signs, it don't matter.
All right, reports from our committees. Do we have any left? Mr.
LGARD has met, yes.
Okay, so you don't have a report tonight.
There's no rule.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the planning commission?
Will be a re-report what I reported last week or.
Not necessarily. I'm listening. I mean, Molly's here. She was at that meeting, so. Unless somebody really needs to know, have a report on last week's planning commission.
Well, I don't mind giving it, I just
Make it brief.
okay, just a quick review of the planning commission. We talked about. One of the things that we're doing later this week is the joint strategic plan meeting, in which our fellow town councilors reporting, that's exciting. There was a discussion about tourist lodging on a property on the Bluff of the River, which was considered, and we're waiting for this the landowner to take further steps on that, but it was an interesting conversation about wanting to put cabins up there. We talked about the comp plan related to safety, and as we're going through it as the planning commission, looking at different aspects of the comp plan, that was the focus of the most recent one. And then we also talked about the East Village by rights, and talked at the committee about the desire for the town to be able to have access with more parkland and trails within the by right. And there was also the issue of, and this is kind of a concern related to understanding that area, was that there's the easement that we have that goes along the sewer line on the first and Main Creek Trail. But there's about 200 yards of that we don't have access to, and so in the future, it's something we need to work out with the landowner. At the moment, it's a recognition, I think some people didn't realize, but that piece of property is one that we'll want to talk more about, both the planning commission and the town. And Mr. Mayor, that's a recap.
Any questions for Dan?
No, but I do have two comments if I could quickly. We need to post for the special session with the planning commission on Friday. So it's my understanding, Matt, if we need 3 days for that. And so you all had decided you could put that on your calendars for Friday. Can you confirm that you can make it on Friday?
The planning commission's at 6 and the town's at 7.
Right.
Oh,
Right, we would have an hour, I would have an hour with the planning commission. And then go on from there because we missed the planning commission session because we did not have enough time to post before that last meeting. We couldn't get confirmation.
I have a quick question. Am I able to ask?
Yes.
a question? Okay,
As it relates to this, right? Yeah.
yeah. I just was saying that we were gonna have two separate, like, off the schedule meetings. And
That's
now we're
right.
just having an hour before the joint session?
No, you're having 2 sessions with council, each 2 hours. The first one is scheduled for this Friday. The second one is TBD. But since we didn't meet for just a session with the planning commission by itself, I decided to add that on to that 2 hours with council so that we get an hour with just the planning commission and then 2 hours with the council.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
and so it could possibly be that we use the May 5th date, but maybe not.
That's right. I think council has to, I think we had some people who had a conflict on May 5th. So we have to reaffirm on planning commission side and then confirm on town council side for a May 5th. Okay, so that's TBD.
Ms. Morris, if I may, if it's helpful not to lose track of the item, we have that on agenda, but we need the vote to call that special meeting. So if it helps to move and pass that now. Since we're there.
Okay, so can I make a motion
Yeah,
for a
that's-
special session with planning commission on
Yeah.
Friday
Yes, ma'am.
Friday this week?
this week?
Oh,
Yep.
this week. I thought it was 5/5.
No, it's the 21st, I
Okay.
believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what time?
And the 5th is tentative.
And what time's this one?
7 o'clock with council, 6 o'clock
Okay.
planning commission.
And how come we didn't meet last week?
This vote
So-
did not occur.
Pardon?
Beg your pardon, the motion that you're making now did not occur.
Right. That's right. We hadn't confirmed on everybody's side, so we couldn't, it's a bureaucratic thing.
So town council had to approve us meeting with you?
No, they had to prove that they could be available at that time.
Oh, I thought that was just the meeting with plan council.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh, that's right. No, no, you're right.
I thought it was
You're
single.
right. You're right. I'm sorry.
So you're just meeting with them alone, right?
No, on Friday at 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, I'm meeting with the planning commission.
Oh, okay.
And from 7 on, I'll meet with the planning
Oh.
commission and with town council.
I'll second your proposal.
Thank
Moved and
you.
seconded, any further discussion? I hear a motion, do I hear all in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
And then just one quick thing, Molly, I'd like to talk to you afterwards. You mentioned about communication between planning commission and town council. I'd like to talk to you to potentially work on that. Okay.
Okay, great.
Hey, Ms. Hyde, you got anything for us?
No update this week.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Tyson, you got anything for us?
Yes, the Government Service Committee, and I just want to respond a little bit to Harold, that the state code authorizes and also probably even encourages that we should have citizen committees. So we do have committees beyond the town council, because there's just so much work to be done. So we farm that out a little bit. So this is what the Government Service Committees does. And the Government Service is just an advisory committee. So we don't make decisions, we just advise. And so, you know, we come up with that. So what we did last time, or what was advised about the town administrator, how to do a candidate search. And so that we had 3 people who were assigned to that, and they went over the 15 applications and weeded them out. And then they recommended 7 and then 3. The Government Services also recommended that we look at the service committees as a whole, like you're talking about, because there is some confusion and some don't meet and some are not regular, and there's some differences of the roles of liaison. And so what the government service only recommended that they have 3 new committees. And one of them is already not even going to be a committee, it's just going to be a project. The web committee, which we've started, which is going to be really good for to have a improved website, a Parks and Rec committee, and a financial committee. So those are recommended committees, and those would be they would have liaisons, they would be representatives to the community, and it was basically advise the town on those matters.
Can I ask another question? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Did you all talk about having a chamber committee?
No, but
You
that's
know,
well,
the
we
town has a ton of businesses that we're not hearing from. I'd really like to know.
the Chamber of Commerce Committee, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Huh?
some sort of connection.
Well, we do, I think, Mr.
Mayor.
He's a board, and
On the board of the
he gives report.
committee, everyone.
He does, he gives report every time. Yeah, he gives report very regularly.
That's not what I was talking about. I thought it would be a nice thing to have a committee that actually conceptualized things and actually did things and reported to.
Well, yeah, we'll take that suggestion. We could bring that back to the government services. We're not done with the committees yet. We still, there's one of
It
the,
wasn't just me.
Right.
I've heard other people suggest that. So.
yeah. One of the recommendations from the government service committee that we have a liaison on each committee, and that the liaison just not be a voting member. Okay, we also that the government service also talked a lot about maintenance, and there's a lot of maintenance issues, and they were looking at possible options to improve the appearance of the town. And that's why we might farm that out as a maintenance committee separate, but Kevin Quick is spearheading that a lot. He's kind of a subcommittee for the maintenance, and we're getting a handle on the maintenance here. So that's one of the committees we're looking at. And then the other thing the government service did, and we're doing it, well, 2 other things. One is we looked at Lindsay Street, and we voted on that about no parking on the Lindsay Street. And then the last thing is we looked at the budget and the revenue, and you know, what can we add taxes? Can we cut services? Can we add services? So we looked at that and made recommendations, and then that comes to us. So these are all recommended, and the committees that just make recommendations and do some of the fine-tuned work before they come to the town council. If the town council did this, we'd be meeting 8 hours a day, and we just can't. We don't have the time, and so these recommended committees are really valuable, in my opinion, and they especially, I think the government services, it's a wonderful committee.
Any questions for Mr. Heisen? Ms. Morris? Anything to report about anything else?
Well, I would just like to say on the web project that we are in the process of getting the website redone. I met with Matt this morning and informed Bill about some of the design aspects of the website. And then once we get the design settled out, we'll be moving to implementation phase and moving content. Before that, we'll probably allow everybody to view sort of their proposal of what the website looks like. That should be coming probably first within a month.
Any questions on that topic? Mr. Payne, you got anything for us this evening?
Just a couple of things. And this kind of ties into what Mr. Tiller was saying. We do have a president of the council. Council elected me a few meetings ago as the president of the council. In the absence of the mayor, I assume the duties of the mayors. Now, I'm gonna ask maybe Matt if he has time to check on this, but my interpretation of that is if I assume the duties of the mayor and a vote comes up, I'm the tie-breaking vote. I'm no longer a member of the council. I assume his duties. So we do have a president, so that should make you happy. And we do have, you know, a way to do it.
I appreciate that. But it
Okay.
isn't in the law.
Yeah, you may have missed it along the way, but yeah, we covered that one.
I think it could be put into the town code. There's no problem.
Well, it's in the code of Virginia, so.
Right, there's not a correlation between the two all the time.
Right, but anyway, yeah, that's been covered. And then secondly, and Meredith helped me on this, as far as the beautification, you have kind of bailed out of the beautification duties or filtering out.
No longer perform my duties effectively with my schedule change at work.
Okay, so we've got got a lot of improvements that the town can make. So on a smaller scale, we did have someone that took care of the flowers, the planters, and she doesn't do it anymore. And they've really gotten to a bad state now. In fact, they're unsightly. We have 30 of them in town. My wife has expressed an interest in taking on that as a volunteer. We made a fact-finding trip over to the valley to a nursery there. It didn't cost the town anything. It cost me $400. And we loaded the car up. So that was for her personal use, of course. So yeah, that was a fact-finding trip. There's a couple of people, nice people over there that are getting together some type of plan, suggestions, and it's supposed to be getting back to her soon. At the same time, Saturday, we're going to the Thomas Jefferson Center of Historic Plants, close to Monticello. They have Jefferson was quite a botanist and kept very good notes. A lot of the native plants are still there that when he was there, and they're being grown locally just down the road from Monticello. So they have a special sale. We're gonna go check that out, and then maybe try to work with them. And I'd also like to visit one more greenhouse. But in talking with Mr. Lawless, we have $500 in the budget. And I just told you, my station wagon held 400, so there's no way that $500 is going to cover 30 planners. We either have to have less planners or more money to do what we need to do. So, and it's planting time, so if everybody will kind of think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Payne? Appreciate all you've been doing. All right, so that's takes care of that. Now it's time for our public hearing on the budget. So I will open the public hearing on the budget, and anyone who wishes to speak on the budget can step forward, state your name, if you live in the town or not, and make your comments. Hearing no responses, I will close the public hearing on the budget, and we will move on to item 7B, ethics. Mr. Wallace, you want to change?
I yield to Ms. Morse.
Okay.
Morse?
This was something I put on, and it's actually a little bit broader. So we've talked a lot about process. We've talked a lot about decorum. I think it's time to perhaps codify these rules. So for example, we've had to go back to the town attorney to trace through the lineage of various decisions. And once we get them, we sort of lose them, right? So I'd like to propose that we start writing these down and capturing them. I think in redoing the website at this point in time is a good time to do this. I've looked, other towns and town councils have rules of procedures, rules of decorum that specify expected behavior plus actions that can be taken if those behaviors aren't in line with expectations. And I think we need to make that very clear. We've talked about agendas tonight, agendas coming in at all manner of times, right? I think we need a timeline and a process for when those get put in so that it's very clear to people who are proposing agendas, and that type of thing. So rules of procedure are not uncommon. Supervisor Price, I don't know if Albemarle County has rules of procedure and decorum. And I think once we're all clear on that, we can operate from the same set of expectations about that. and all be clear on what is expected and what can happen if those rules aren't adhered to. Does that sound reasonable to council?
That's good.
Alex, you're giving
Yeah,
a little bit,
yeah.
huh? No, please.
I want to make sure our hands are inside. You know, a lot of things pop up, like the infamous midnight proffer, but I want to make sure that whatever we, you know, put into action here is not going to tie our hands anyway.
Right.
And I do like the. It can be annoying, but I think having a bit of a free form discussion can be beneficial and
Well,
not
and-
trying to buy, you know.
I don't think this is intended to, and maybe Supervisor Price can comment from her experience, given that Albemarle County has rules of procedure. This isn't intended to squash discussion or anything like that, but just bound the rules by which discussions are held, to bound the rules by which, you know, we operate in terms of process in calendar and time management and things like that. So anything that we would propose would have to be voted on by council anyway. So it's not like it can appear out of thin air. So Supervisor Price, do you want to comment at all from your perspective?
Sure. All right, thank you. That's a great question, and because the Board of Supervisors sets our policies and procedures, we have the authority to amend or make exceptions to the policies and procedures. Excuse me, and there are times each year where we will do that because of some exigency of what has come up. But by having set expectations and procedures, it reduces the frequency of these last minute things that are brought up to be added to the agenda, and does provide for a more regular movement of business through the board. But if something were to come up and we needed to make an amendment or an exception, then we would have the authority to do that.
That's my question. You know, sometimes if we say. Have the agenda items in, say, the Tuesday before the meeting, sometimes you don't know, you know, the Tuesday before. But yeah.
And actually, today I was in a meeting, virtual, and something came up that we realized there is a deadline, and therefore, because of the public notice requirements and everything. You know, I was talking with the clerk, and while our normal procedure would have been that an item like this should have been brought up to the clerk to be able to have it properly staffed, you know, 2 weeks ago, because of a statutory deadline, we need to have it at the next meeting. And again, it's something that the board can just say, we understand these things do come up. So it doesn't really hide behind us, but it does provide more regularity into the processes.
Well, and I think it's a good point about the posting and things like that have to happen, because I was never aware of these things before I became a member of town council. Like, why can't things happen more quickly? Right? Well, because you have to post, and you have to post 3 days before, and you have to have 2 sources of where you post, or whatever these rules are. It's not only for clarity, for our own clarity, but it's for clarity to the community of why things move potentially more slowly than they would like. I think having that and being able to capture these process pieces, like who gets to vote on liaisons for committees, right? There's this lineage. Well, the state says one thing, but then the town charter says another thing, but then in 19 whatever, council voted for this, and this sort of supersedes what came down the line. We need to capture that so that we don't 6 months down the road get to that point where we're asking the same question again and we've forgotten the answer to it.
Well, that's one thing, but I think part of it we're getting at is having some norms of how we operate here and have civil discourse. And I don't know if Albemarle has that kind of those kind of norms or regulations, because and I know that, like Loudoun County, I follow some. There's a fine line between free speech and passion. And we all are passionate about some things and sometimes angry about things, but and we all need to watch our language and our volume and things like that. But that's what we need. I think we need to have a norm on, but I don't know if we can regulate that, can we?
Well, and Councilor Heisen, thank you. And this is, I guess, would be sort of the second part of it. And if I might suggest as a is an offer that if your town administrator or clerk were to reach out to the clerk for the board, we could easily just email or show you where on the
Yes.
website, because we have all of those same things. We also have guidance from the county attorney in terms of what can and cannot be regulated in the free speech area. And I am provided, the chair is always provided and keeps a copy of what those rules are at the dais, so that if something comes up, we ensure that we are allowing the free expression,
Right.
but it cannot actually disrupt the meeting. And so there are limitations, but people can be kind of nasty in their language, and we can't
Right.
stop to that from the public. Separately from that, we also have expectations of the decorum by members of the Board of Supervisors amongst each other.
Right, and also relating to the, but what about the public? Is there, how does that work? If they become unruly, because I know that's happened in other counties particularly.
That's the information that I was mentioning that the
Okay.
county attorney is provided to us,
Okay.
that the chair keeps at the dais in order to know, it's sort of a gradual stepping.
Right.
But there are some things that people can do and say that we cannot
Right.
regulate. But there's a certain point where it becomes disruptive to
Right.
the conduct of the meeting, and then it can be.
And they can be removed?
If
Mhm.
necessary, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Fortunately, the citizens and residents of Albemarle County behave in a
Yeah.
very
And
high
here
manner,
too, and here
and
too.
it's extremely rare that we
Yeah,
have had
I know,
to
but-
even raise that as a.
But I've seen some in other counties, and particularly Loudon and some places.
Yeah.
Wow, I mean, it's just like outrageous.
Yeah, we are very blessed by the community here in Albemarle County.
Yeah.
Very, very respectful. But in return, if I might add, we on the board, because we have rules of decorum, endeavor to always be respectful to the members of our community as well.
One thing I've noticed, Supervisor Price is, well, I've addressed council, the board of supervisors 3 times in person, 1 time virtually.
Yes,
There's a 3-minute limit
Mhm.
from the public.
Mhm.
And there's no back and forth banner like this. If I'm addressing your board of supervisors, I ask you a question or a question of the board, I won't get an answer.
right.
Thank you.
And part of
That's a
the,
difference.
it is different. And part of that probably is both cultural as well as the size of the community and in our meetings. And so we frequently will have many people sign up to speak during public hearings. But when it comes to matters from the public for items that are not on the agenda for a public hearing, matters that the board has previously considered, or matters that are pending before the board, we limit the public comment to just those items, and we do not engage in back and forth. And while I know that many members of the community may find that, disappointing, we also believe that that has helped to avoid the confrontations and contention that comes from challenging each other verbally back and forth. We pay very close attention to everything that our community members tell us. But again, if I can differentiate, a public hearing is different from a meeting held in public.
Mhm.
And it is, these are business meetings, ours are, yours are, you have an agenda, you have things you have to get done. And if we don't, and our board currently has a policy that we limit public comment to things that are basically pending before the board, separate from public hearings where people, sign up separately to speak for that. Because if we didn't do that, we would not be able to get our work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Before we move on to staff report on capital projects. About staff report on capital projects.
Thank you, Council. You had some discussion at your work session about kind of where our capital budget stands at this point in the fiscal year. We're 3/4 of the way through, so it's time to wrap up that capital spending, cut off projects if they're going over budget, or if you want to make a final push on that spend within your budget, you can do that. So I wanted to bring attention to a couple of project updates within your financial report, but to share a little bit more detail about where they stand. This is a big year for capital spending, one of the major kind of goals and achievements of town council in the past 2 fiscal years with the federal American Rescue Plan Act funding was to make progress on capital project priorities. It's a good way to make up for lost time without creating the kind of ongoing funding commitment that comes with adding positions where the grant money goes away and you're stuck with payroll obligations that are hard to meet. So our capital spend this year is larger than it is in past years. The largest recently completed capital project line is the James Riverfront park improvements. Those were designed in the first year of our ARPA spend, the fall of 2021, in partnership with the Department of Wildlife Resources. That land is under their operational control. They leased it from CSX, and DWR has maintained that site fairly well for many years. But the 2021 Town Council had an interest in sprucing it up because for many people coming off the river, that park was their first view of town. And they wanted to present a little bit more of a park-like setting, more inviting than just the boat ramp. So to that end, the current budget has $20,000 in it for construction. And that work is completed a bit under budget. We have about $2,000 remaining on that line. What it got done was a parking boundary on the site because you may have seen using it, the trailer parking can be erratic and fishermen going right up to the river's edge to fish off of it. You worry about erosion or accidents there. So the landscaping plan that we made has a perimeter line of boundary stones along the water's edge. Rather than using concrete parking blocks that might be unsightly, we went with these boulders, which also serve the informal purpose of seating, where a picnic table or other kinds of seating might be washed away or damaged in the floods. Those local bedrock kind of boulder stones aren't going to go anywhere. So those are completed and lined up here now. And I really want to recognize and thank the Department of Wildlife Resources staff for adding to the machine labor on that. We had to employ one equipment operator for some equipment that the state team didn't have, but they probably put in 5 times the man hours of what our contractor did and really leveraged it. So they're very proud and excited to have that space to stop. Happy to take more discussion about that if you're interested.
Has the design been changed at all since what they initially proposed 3 years ago?
No, the town council approved that design. DWR had some later operational changes to it, but it was just within the kind of markup on that.
Right.
So the basic idea stands and DWR didn't publish anything else.
Okay. Because I know there was a lot of concern with the rocks and the type of how big they were and then breaking them up and where they were put. So I talked to the people who did the and they had concerns too about that. And they were kind of don't do it anymore, the infrastructure, green infrastructure. So DRW is doing it now. And I'm wondering if they could present the final project to us in the timeline and kind of, how this is going to be wrapped up because it's been going up. It started at 21 and now it's almost, so that's 2 years. So I mean, and I know some of the public have asked, what's going on with down there, this, that and the other. So it'd be nice to have a presentation of that or communication with them and about what's the plan is. And I know we planted trees down there too. And they talked to me about that and those trees didn't make it, but I'm not sure if that's part of the plan too, because they cut down a lot of trees there. And, and I think it has a good potential, but it'd be nice to see what it looks like or what it's supposed to look like.
That's right. There were some aging and dead or dangerous trees on that site. DWR did the tree work, so we didn't have to pay for any tree work. Replacing those is important because the big established river trees really work to help hold that soil in place. You're right, the first planting of wetland trees didn't take well, not least because of the site work that came along later. But that's important to add back in.
And they're going to put some murals up too, right? If I understand.
There is some interest in painting the old gauge tower over there.
I think, well, anyway, I've talked to them recently. I'd really like to see something, and some people have talked to me that says Scottsville somewhere, Scottsville boat landing, Scottsville, or even some sort of state sign that says boat landing. There's no identification anywhere. People have stopped me and said, where's the boat landing? Where's the boat landing? There should be, we got all kinds of information about where the DMV is, but we have no information about where the boat landing is. And I'm not sure how that would, but maybe we could communicate to them to somebody's going, you know, to the boat landing where it is. So at least some sort of identification, and then just for marketing, something about Scottsville, you know,
Yes, sir.
if it is a Scottsville boat landing, maybe, is it called Scottsville boat landing?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I mean, it'd be nice to have a sign there, and that gauge is such a great. I mean, we could have a gauge there that would show where the floods are, and that, I mean, it could be a really kind of a tourist attraction. I mean, people have talked to me about, well, why don't we make this you know, functional, you know, and historic kind of boat landing. But anyway, those are some ideas I've heard from the public.
I think the state staff would be happy to show off the partnership, and I'll be glad to invite them to a future work session.
Mhm.
The other large pending capital project is our police vehicle replacement. You'll recall from a past police report that the chief has taken delivery of that newest SUV, which came in under the state bid. That was good procurement work. It's being worked on now, getting all of its equipment installed, the wiring and the decaling on it. So it's not complete yet. I'm trying to push those vendors to finish and get that spend done so that it all falls within the current fiscal year. That's important for them to know so that it doesn't create a pain point in our next budget. We want to try to wrap those things up before June 30th. So we'll share the updates on that. It might require a budget adjustment at the last minute if the work's not getting done on schedule.
Any questions for Matt?
Mr. Lawless, if there is an surplus of $2,000, can that be repurposed?
You have some space in there where, as we've discussed, you can rearrange line items as long as your total spend doesn't
Right.
change. So there is a moment in the last couple of months of the year as we try to glide in and land on target without going over in this budget to make some quick purchases. Things like perennial plants are
That's what I was
are a
wondering.
great choice.
Could we
So-
use that money to fund the planters and things like that? And would anyone here have an objection to that?
I'm confident there's like space for that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question, and I'm sure it's in here, but you'll need to tell me where it is. Before I can find it.
Yes, ma'am.
As far as, spending for parks. Before the end of this fiscal year. I know, the packet boat was more expensive than I thought it was gonna be. Is there money left in the parks?
It's close, and so that's where I'd continue to watch that total capital spend. Right now, it's at 81% out of the year, and there's $50,000 remaining, which is a lot. The police vehicle would eat up a fair portion of that. I feel comfortable saying we can make room in capital for $2,000 items, but not $10,000 items.
I have a concern about, a budget. I have a concern with the, request for the, proposal from Concrete Creative for maps. Apparently Stuart Munson was working on that and made the decision that our budget couldn't support getting the maps done. Is that right?
That last year?
No, that was recently. That
He's
was
not even
in
on the
January. Kristen Freshwater, Concrete Creative. In having a discussion, I found out that she had been contacted about doing a proposal for maps. And that somehow in all of this, and I guess I'm just looking for clarification. Stuart Munson had made a decision that our budget couldn't support getting those maps done this year. And I have a concern on a couple levels of it, that it never came before us, you know, to make a decision on that. And with the amount of money, and if I'm correct if I'm not, correct me, the proposal was for about $3,200 for the maps. I feel like the amount of money that we spent on the kiosks right now are unusable. You know, we spent 27,000, I feel like 3,000 more to at least make them usable would have been a good thing to come before us, so I'm just worried about Stuart wants to make decisions about our budget. And B, how come we didn't see that, and C, do we have money in the parks? Budget left that if we discuss it, take a look at the proposal and like it, that we would actually be able to make a decision on that as opposed to finding out about it from other people.
Good questions, all, thank you, I'm happy to take a moment on it. The final decision on any spending, go, no go, is yours and mine, not individual volunteers. As you said earlier, there are lots of projects where volunteers can help originate ideas and do outreach work, but they do not have the final decision ever on whether or not we do something or spend money. The park kiosks do need maps. They're designed with signboards on them, and a map of the parks is the perfect thing to have at the entrance to a park site. So I asked around how that might be done and began to scope it out. So a local graphic designer to make maps could be a really good idea. I didn't complete that procurement and didn't fully run it through. Around that time that quote came in, we had a lot more concern about the overall state of our budget and that project in particular. So I certainly didn't want to be designing and ordering maps if the kiosks were going to go away. So I put that one on hold, and that's where it stands. To your point and question for action, there may still be some budget space for that. And you're right, the kiosks, if they stay, do probably need a map on them. I'm not certain what your comfort level is on how much you'd like to spend for artistic maps versus a quick and dirty map. And that is a great project to choose at the end of the year with surplus. Is that all clear?
Put that on the work session next time.
Let's make a motion for that work session next time. Thank you, Alex.
No.
Well, I mean, as far as the work session, I mean, is that the time we're gonna go line by line for the budget? Is that the idea?
Is that the time we're gonna go on by line?
Because we did that with the police today, and that was pretty, you know.
I thought you were gonna have a special session.
Oh, you want a special
We
something?
posted a work session last week that we have.
It's special, okay.
meeting.
That sounds good.
Only thing we do. is
That
go
sounds
line by line.
That sounds good.
Budget.
When do we want to do that?
But if we want to make that the work session,
Well, that-
if we have nothing else pending, if we want to make that the work session.
We always have.
We always have things.
We always have things pending, and that's still a month away.
Well, let's have a special, I'm okay with the special work session.
I am.
Go for the budget, the whole thing.
When do we have to have the line item budget approved by?
Certainly before June 30th. Our target for that budget adoption is your May business meeting, which is May 15th. It really helps if our bookkeeper and auditor can have about a month to turn over the budget and set up. You can take special meetings later if we need to, but it's tight. So I would recommend a detailed budget review at your May work session. Make any line item edits that you need to and be ready to adopt on May 15th.
Okay.
Do you know if anything else is? Superintendent, I mean, could we make the entire work session next month? A budget session? Can I withdraw my?
Can I ask something about the canal basin?
Sure, yes, sir.
And let me ask you, Matt, if I could, I can't remember the name of the group. There's a group upriver that has recently built bateaus. I don't know if they're affiliated with the bateau tour group here, but they seem to be pretty handy, and of course, try to make things historically correct. We've still got some repairs that need to be made on the other two vehicles, if you will, down here. I've taken a bit more of an interest in it. As far as that goes, I try to go down a couple of times a week and move picnic tables, that put the rocks back for kids to play with. I've gotten a lot of debris out of those two boats, and that's what brought me to this. They could use some work. As opposed to getting a contractor like we did last time, would you be able to reach out to these people that do this? Because they have all the connections and maybe they could help us out.
Certainly.
That includes the barrels and everything, because we got the festival coming up in June.
Yeah, it would be nice.
If I could brighten it up a little bit.
The bateau that we have there now is a retired festival boat, which wasn't seaworthy anymore. It's good for display. So I'd be happy to refresh that question and see if we can find one.
Okay, we always need to get that place looking good for the.
Are you talking about replacing a boat with one of
No,
their
no,
boats?
just
or fixing
replacing the.
Oh, the
walkway,
plank, okay, right.
It's wouldn't, I don't think it would be
Yeah,
too expensive,
No, I don't think
but
it would
we don't
be.
wanna do it if we don't have the money for it.
Yeah, I think
I've
that's,
talked to the Canal Society a little bit inadvertently through one of the guys that does the tours, he's related to one of the members, and they expressed an interest in wanting to donate another boat or two. When they can water, and I think we can get to that cycle of, letting the older boats sit until they're not, display ready, and then to take 2 new ones and kind of
right,
rotate them in
Good
and out.
idea.
I think they're interested, I don't know.
And that might be
They
the
might need
about
just another
thinking of
push
it.
in conversation, to
Mhm.
kind of get that turning again, but I know that expressed interest in wanting to do it.
Well, and to sort of piggyback on that thought, Alex, about the barrels that are
Yeah.
there that are in need of replaced.
Right.
Can we reach out to some of the local wineries, distilleries to see if they have some that they can repurpose and might want to donate? It could be a tax write-up for them and a win for us. Excuse me?
Some places sell them for like $50, I don't think they're very expensive.
Yeah.
It might not be the same style though.
I think
Well-
these are called hogs heads down
Yeah,
here.
hogs heads.
Yeah. That's
we
what they
want,
are.
I
we want
know.
both.
The vernacular, I should use the vernacular.
But the other thing is that.
But can we reach out to them? Is anybody willing to do that?
I can ask.
Can you take that on, Alex? Yeah, thank you.
But the other thing down at the Bateau Canal or the canal, that platform there, that really needs some looking at. I mean, it's just I think it was a display, but you can't even see in it anymore. I don't know.
That material doesn't weather very well.
Yeah, it's, I think it had a lock or something in there. But I think that was what
There's
it
a
was.
model of the locks,
Yeah,
canal with the locks,
Right.
and that's like, you said, that plexiglass.
yeah. Can that be, I mean,
Besides people putting laying
Right,
stuff all over.
right. it
I've
doesn't-
tried to clean it with everything,
Yeah.
It needs
except
replacement.
for atom bomb, I'm telling you, it just doesn't clean.
Well, maybe we could replace it.
All right, let's move on. I think we've already taken care of item 7D.
Mayor,
Yes.
you have an open motion technically for the guys, right?
Meredith says you wanna make a.
I would put,
Second.
the discussion.
The budget on the-
The special session for the budget?
Yeah, no, to.
Oh,
Put
the maps.
To put the maps on the.
Oh, discussion. Okay.
Work session.
It's a
You
technical.
don't need a motion for that. Just put it on there.
Yeah, okay.
Did you want to take up the zoning item of Ms. Radley's, the 520 Valley Street? We had that at work session. had a
See if we can
public
get that knocked out too.
Or it's available for action now, if y'all ready.
Want to do it now?
It's not out here.
It's not on the agenda that we approved. Let's do it
Does
next
she
month.
know about it? Does she, would she,
Yes, Ms. Radley is here online.
she's online?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that we approve her request.
I second that.
Approved in a second, any discussion?
I'd like to know specifically what the planning commission said about that request. And I'd like to know also what the back lot is going to, is that going to be commercial as well, the back lot? And can that even be commercial?
It has to be commercial. It's
The whole thing's gonna be commercial.
Mhm.
One other
So-
all
Yeah.
this.
Right.
Residential.
Well,
Mhm.
the
But
back,
that is commercial. Residential, it's commercial where she lives, and residential where the state. Yeah.
She wants it to be residential, commercial.
no, I think she wants,
Not the whole-
yeah, I think it's a little confusing. She wants the whole thing.
Okay, we have planning.
Beg your pardon, the use is different from the underlying zoning, but she has a residential use there, which is allowed to continue. And the rest of Valley Street is zoned commercial, even though there are many upstairs residences, so that's not in conflict. To Mr. Heisen's question, the planning commission recommendation was to not rezone it and keep it the way it is, primarily because they lacked information about the future plan. So that was,
Well-
that was at the point that Ms. Riley created the draft survey document that you saw. You saw further more information at your work session than what planning commission did.
Well, this
Yeah.
this plot that talking about rezoning
Yes,
is actually vacant now.
yes,
Okay, so and it is zoned residential.
yes,
We want to change it to commercial
yes.
with the existing sewer line, the setbacks, the back part of it, the slope.
Mhm.
I don't think entrance ways would come in, but basically you can't build anything there.
It certainly has constraints, and it's
You
not.
I mean, really, you could put a pup tent there. And that's not my joke, that's what you could put there. But how can we rezone it commercial when you can't put anything commercial there in a permanent nature? Now, you could bring a food truck and park it there maybe. Make it commercial, I don't know how that works, and I'm not joking, I'm just saying, you're rezoning something that can't be used for the purpose of commercial.
It is tight.
It's very
Well,
tight,
Mike, if
and
you-
I can see Ms. Radler's point, and it's confusing.
I'm confused about what her intent is. I don't think that it's gonna make a huge big difference, but she was commercial when she had her commercial
Yeah.
business there. And then she closed that down and did not use that front part of the building and stays in the back. So she was commercial for a long time, was paying taxes accordingly and switched it to residential. So now she's wanting to change it to commercial and is she looking to maybe make that more attractive to someone who wants to make it
She
into
wants to sell off the two
Smaller parcel.
smaller parcels.
I got you.
And considering the entire street is zoned commercial,
Mhm.
it is easier to.
Yeah,
sell, if I understand correctly.
so when
As
it
a
was just,
commercial.
yeah.
site.
it came
And
to
it's
us
supposed
as
to be zoned commercial back in the 90s, and it was an oversight and mistake on town council's part. That it never did get rezoned,
Right.
and what we would be voting to do is stay consistent with how the entire street is zoned.
And just to make a point, I just agree with what you just said, is, I mean, everybody's making very good points, it's more, my part of it would be to say. We're trying to make right what we think was supposed to have been done. Back at that original plan that was documented, the town council agreed with it, but they didn't follow through on the vote, and so that was the impetus behind.
Yeah,
this
we
idea.
felt like 20+ years had gone by and. Without any more information about, what was going on with that property. I mean, if she was just gonna keep it as is and not do anything with it, I don't see the reason to do that without more information. So,
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Well,
that's been
I'm not done.
seconded.
Well, I have a concern about the biggest concern to me is the critical slope, this 25%, that's bigger than 25% there, that's probably 45% slope. And I don't see how anything could be developed there if that's gonna be commercial. I think the first two properties on the street are fine, but the one in the back, that would be compromised, that whole area with taking that slope down, and I don't think that's allowable with, you know much about this, the slope regulation with that?
They certainly are challenging, as Mr. Payne said, both the slope and the utility lines make it tricky to.
But is
build.
that allowable? That's what I'm asking. Can you even do that with in our code to have to develop on a slope like that?
It requires a higher level of engineering.
So, I mean, can we say, okay, the first two are okay and the back one has to have a special use or special
Well, do you leave it residential now?
And you can't build a house on it.
Right.
you can't build a house on it, but you can't take that slope down either. It would just create so much erosion.
It might undermine the property above it too.
Yeah, I mean, that water would just flow down there if that happened. I mean, that's I go down that road a lot and it's a big steep slope and I don't know how even you could get a vehicle in there or, you know, if it was a commercial, how would they load or unload or turn around in there?
We got too many ifs.
Yeah, right.
But what I'm getting ready to say is that if the whole parcel, all that was commercial. And we rectified the situation that the council in the nineties failed to do. And, the property owner wishes to sell it to somebody, they've got to come before, they have to figure out what they're gonna do with it. They have to come before planning commission, they have to get everything approved. Just because it's all gonna be commercial doesn't mean that somebody's gonna come right in and cut down the hill and build something back there. They probably should never be able to sell it.
So they won't be able to do that by right, you're saying?
No,
Yeah, you'll have building inspector and site plan requirements for any construction, so things like a huge retaining wall. Wouldn't go in there without very strict
But
scrutiny.
you may never be able to sell it. Because
Because
it's
they got
not-
some dead space in the middle of our downtown now, if nothing can go on there.
I think that's
sort
a
of
fair
that
point.
way now, isn't it? I mean, it's
mean,
residential,
yeah.
nothing can go in.
All right, let's get back to the fact that we have a motion made and a second. Now, is there any other discussion on this before we take a vote?
Well, Mr. Mayor, another thing I was gonna say, I think every counselor here has made good points, there's legitimate
All
thoughts.
kind
about
of
direction.
result, everybody's looking at it from a good perspective, but what do we want to be? This. Do we not want to rectify something that the council in the nineties failed to do? Because of their error, we're doing this now. So, any more discussion before I ask for the vote? Mr. Clerk?
Bassett,
No,
Christo,
yes,
Hines,
Yes.
Tyson,
No,
Morse,
Yes,
Payne,
No,
you're 3-3, Mayor.
Good. Then I will vote in favor of changing it to all commercial.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, anybody else got anything on the line before we go into our next closed session? If not, we thank all those in the audience for being here and you are free to leave.
thank you.
Right, thank
See
you.
you, see you, Dan. Thank you.
You, I'm gonna be. Check out your phone.
Yeah, you want to do it again? Let's go over here and close the session.
so we don't need a recess? Do you want to do a recess before we go into closed session?
Yeah, let's do that. Yes.
all of these.
5 minutes.
Meredith's going with me. 5 minutes.
All right, 8:30.
Uh,
That's 10 minutes.
I buy the long ones.
You better smoke it fast.
Yeah, I do in the winter time, outside.
I'm keeping the mic live.
It was still in session. Right, Mike is still live, everyone, so you know.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna get
And then.
It's a good time in life.
Good.
And I'm telling you, Yeah, I'm not usually on the phone. I figured you were busy. Thank you.
Worth doing.
So then it becomes something of, you know, they're gonna just. And, I'm gonna check and see if I'm. Thanks,
And then
man.
you're gonna house side. Top house up there, on the-
Last house. So if you're coming downstairs in the Dollar General, you just look up.
Yeah.
You can barely see her house. You can see it's just a tiny difference.
Yeah,
But as soon as all the foliage really comes in, just like with my house, well, obvious.
yeah, I'd rather not do that. That's not- I mean, I bring bamboo back. Bring the bamboo with us, second part. Well. Then I did actually some real spot.
Everything's growing nicely right now.
I just wanted to find it.
So you had mentioned at the last meeting, which is that, the communication connection. You know, you were gonna call me, I don't know if we feel that very long. So I got you.
We are not business, these days, you get them in.
You know, you can Burn Street.
About the tour business, they were
Oh, yeah. We're busy. Saw one of my schools today, and that's a nice thing when they come through here. It's my job normally to be in usually every other week, or even sometimes every week, not the year, I will be able to see. But
So.
given what happened medically earlier this year and last year, and then coming out of COVID, I haven't kicked in that side yet. I'm glad that you do that with that. Because I used to have the opportunity to spend a lot of time with my in-laws, I used to live there in Vernon. So I had. But I could have an office. And then most of my lives here.
Yeah, we can start finding and then making the projects.
And when I compared to these meetings, citizen.
I've also done probably maybe a dozen.
But like when I interjected this, every question. That was maybe not.
I call them live in the refrigerator. Great, we haven't had it.
Yeah. They were on a committee of action, and some of them are council.
Yeah.
Then you have to write one. You know, it's just so very complicated, and that kind of. Yeah. We don't have a big expense, so it's a little. Well, we're watching. It's fine. But
where did we go from here? Did you want to just
And this is good. So I was yeah.
Been enjoying.
Now we can talk about yeah. There's more. I'm used to
You're work on those, Phil, I'll help you with it if you want to do anything down there. I go down there regularly too. I think that's, I agree, that plank needs work and we could do that ourselves. We get a board, we got a board, it would be the hardest couple of days.
Well, while I'm reading down and seeing it, I think we'll pick up stuff and.
It looked a lot better. It looked, looked good.
But if you still have a receipt, you could receipt take that money. For the plants that you put on the back of your book.
Yep, Marine.
Oh, what are they?
Oh, yeah, that's right. No, I said that they didn't cost the town any money, but it cost me $400. That's what I was getting at.
You know, she is a woman after my own heart. I would have done the same thing for Mother's Day every year. My husband's a terrible picker out. So, I said, okay, I'm gonna help you. We're gonna go to the university and we're gonna get some plants, and then I want to do the piano farm. So every year for Mother's Day, that's what we do. We go out to dinner, we get the plants, we put some in there.
I used to go to the public supermarket down in Atlanta. They had beautiful flowers.
Oh, yeah.
there.
Like just
And,
recently.
you know, yeah, just pick up the flowers, take it home, you know, no holiday or anything. And I had a cashier. And that's.
You made her jealous. You set the bar high.
Oh, my God.
Did you read the grants back by the way?
Yeah.
He can join you.
He's,
I'm so glad. Thank you. Because, you know, one thing I want to talk to you about. They can do the grants out. Is that he was talking about how. Higher.
Did we change it to 8 or 8? Did we change it to 8 or 8?
They got here.
Oh, so we were supposed to do it at 8?
You're gonna do it right. Let's let's go into closed session, we'll go in there.
Okay.
Yes, the motion would be in order.
Motion.
I move that the council enter a closed meeting as authorized in subsection A of Virginia Code section 2.2-3711. Specifically, the subsection on discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
In closed session, is that the one over there?